Welcome back to Live from Paris. I'm Belle Lupton. It's 10:30 here in the French capital. Let's remind you of our top stories here on France 24. Anti-austerity strikes threaten to bring neighbours France and Belgium to a standstill. Petrol stations out of petrol, rail networks grounded, and street protests. We'll be bringing you the latest on the government's attempts to turn things around. The Ivory Coast begins its first trial for crimes against humanity. In the dock, the wife of former President Laurent Gbagbo, who's charged with her part in the lead-up to a bloody civil war. And a yellow card for one of football's highest-paid players who's been put on trial in Spain for tax fraud. We begin here in France, where the government made a move earlier to conciliate unions threatening strikes by announcing a pay rise for teachers and promising to speed up talks with railway representatives. But François Hollande says that doesn't mean he's backing down from the key provisions of his proposed labour reforms. And Prime Minister Manuel Valls says the ball is now in the court of the hardline CGT union to put forward ways out of the confrontation over the controversial El Khomri law, which makes hiring and firing easier. Solange Mougin explains what the government is trying to do to end the impasse.
A war of wills between the French Prime Minister and the head of France's largest labour union, the CGT. Both are vowing they won't back down. The government, though, has begun to put in place what looks like a strategy. It's been negotiating one-on-one with different sectors and playing to each his demands to discourage them from joining a national movement led by the CGT union. On Tuesday, the country's transportation minister described his ongoing talks with aviation unions this way.
We are continuing to negotiate, and I hope that there will be unions that will get on board with us. Which ones? Those that are most in line with us.
For weeks, the government has been trying to find a middle ground with aviation unions and Air France. Also striking or gearing up to strike, unions representing the National Rail Service, Paris Metro, garbage treatment centres, ports and employees of oil refineries. They're all in talks with the Élysée. And their list of demands isn't only in regard to scrapping the labour reforms, which gives François Hollande some wiggle room to keep each sector from picketing the labour law. And so far, it has worked in a few sectors. Hollande and Valls have negotiated with truckers to exempt them from parts of the El Khomri law. They stopped striking. Same goes for researchers, after the government promised additional funding. Finally, the education sector. It is deep in talks over a $1 billion packet that would raise teachers' salaries across the board. Digging deep into the state's pockets to make sure the labour reforms are in the bag.
Solange Mougin reporting there. And over in Belgium, anti-austerity strikes are also reaching a crescendo. On Tuesday, walkouts took place across the public sector for the first time, bringing parts of the country to a standstill. Buses, schools and postal services have been crippled by walkouts. Workers are protesting against the centre-right government's policies, which include an increase in retirement age and more flexible working hours. Belgium's French-speaking south was hardest hit, with domestic trains out of service all day. It's the 6th day of strikes, and some unions have threatened to continue all the way through until the weekend. And ongoing strikes are not the only worry for France's government at the moment. It's just over a week to go until football's Euro 2016 kicks off. And now the US has warned its citizens that matches and events will be potential targets for terrorists. France has ruled out cancelling the tournament, and it's beefing up security. One area that's drawn a lot of attention is fan zones, giant screens put up around the country to give spectators a sense of being almost in the stadium. Now, some people say they pose a security risk, as Alexander Orcott reports.
At the foot of the Eiffel Tower, preparations are well underway. An entire village constructed around a giant screen where anyone can come to enjoy the competition for free. A fan zone that is not to everyone's liking.
Normally I have a parking space here, but the parking permits are invalid for a month from 15th of June until roughly 15th of July, and so I don't know what I'll do with my car.
As part of the security measures, all car parks in the vicinity have been emptied from the beginning of this week until the end of the competition in July. Even if their regulars are struggling for parking, this Parisian cafe is not complaining. 90,000 people are expected in the fan zone each day.
We are supposed to be working anyway. It's our job. It's our profession, so clearly if there are lots of people, that's why we are here. We are going to adapt to it, and it can only be good. We cannot wait.
Fan zones are also being set up in other French cities, like here in Lyon, home to one of Europe's largest open squares. But here too, some residents are furious.
The whole square will be invaded by football fans. And so we're going to have a month of non-stop noise and craziness.
It'll be a bit of a nuisance if we're honest. But the people who've decided to live here at the Place Bellecour already knew that events are held here.
While the fan zones are a nuisance for some and a business opportunity for others, more and more people will be arriving up to the high point on the 10th of July, the day of the final.
Next, Ivory Coast's former First Lady has gone on trial in Abidjan for crimes against humanity. About 3,000 people were killed in post-electoral violence that rocked the country in 2010 when her husband, Laurent Gbagbo, refused to stand down as president. He's currently facing war crimes charges at the International Criminal Court. The trial comes just 5 days after Simone Gbagbo lost her final appeal against her 20-year sentence for crimes against the state. Clément Bonnereau reports.
All smiles as Simone Gbagbo is greeted by supporters in the courtroom. Ivory Coast's former First Lady stands trial for crimes against humanity. She's already serving a 20-year jail sentence for crimes against the state.
I'm waiting for justice to be done for the victims. There should be justice for them. They have suffered so much.
The wife of former President Laurent Gbagbo is accused of overseeing a committee that organised reprisals against her husband's rivals in 2010. More than 3,000 people died after Laurent Gbagbo refused to cede the presidency to his rival and current president, Alassane Ouattara. Some say that Simone Gbagbo's trial is a sign of President Ouattara's bias.
Because the Ivorian authorities want Mrs. Gbagbo to be convicted, this court was chosen to do just that. This is political justice taking its orders from political powers.
The president denies these allegations, but Tuesday's trial has already been dealt a blow. Human rights groups representing some of the victims have pulled out, saying that Simone Gbagbo's case had been rushed to trial without a full investigation.
Well, for more on that trial, let's bring in Gilles Yabi, the founder of a West African think tank. He joins us on the phone from the Senegalese capital, Dakar. And Gilles, how important is it for the Ivory Coast that this trial is taking place domestically rather than in another African country or at the International Criminal Court?
Yes, I think it is important for Ivorian and particularly for the victims of the crisis in the country. But at the same time, I'm afraid that there is a confusion which is not necessarily very good for the sake of reconciliation and perception of impartial justice. The fact that we have different places, different trials, and not a clear view of the precise crimes that are going to be punished, this is not necessarily shedding light on all the key episode of violence during the crisis in Ivory Coast.
Well, and you mentioned it there, doubt has already been cast over the legitimacy of this trial. So 3 rights groups representing the victims have pulled out, saying they don't have any confidence in the trial. What hopes do you have that this can be a fair trial?
Yes, well, I think that the problem is the level of preparation of the trial. I think the 3 important rights organizations in the country have been denouncing the fact that there is kind of a precipitation in the organization of this trial. And we have already had that impression last year when we have the first series of trials against people who were close to Laurent Gbagbo. And again, I think that is the source of confusion. What would be really good for kind of the history of the country and for the sake of reconciliation would be to have a different size of violence of the crisis, and then to identify who carry the most important responsibility in the commission of those crimes. So having the senior political level, President Gbagbo and Simon Gbagbo, is good, but we also need to see who are the people who were in the inner circle of Laurent Gbagbo and who made decisions, specific decisions for specific crimes.
And of course, during that civil war, it may not just have been the pro-Gbagbo party or contingent who were committing war crimes. Do you think there's a risk, as has been said by some people, that President Alassane Ouattara's government only intends to prosecute crimes by pro-Gbagbo forces in that conflict?
Yeah, well, that is the second complication and the second source of concern is the fact that for now, President Alassane Ouattara has consistently said that the justice would not spare people who were associated to his camp during the post-electoral crisis. But the reality is that for now, it's a lot of promises, and people are still waiting to see senior people who were following or supporting Alassane Ouattara, to see them also facing justice for the crimes. And of course, all of this is not really good for reconciliation in the country.
Gilles Yabi, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you very much for your analysis on that. That was Gilles Yabi, the founder of a West African think tank. Moving on, Lionel Messi's trial has begun in Barcelona, although the Argentinian football superstar was not there. He's accused of defrauding Spain of more than €4 million in unpaid taxes. Phoebe Lanza-Wood has the story.
He's the highest paid footballer in the world and has an annual income of over €70 million. But Lionel Messi is in a tight financial spot. He's gone on trial for tax evasion, charges that could land him and his father with a hefty fine and even possibly a jail term. The pair are accused of using a chain of fake companies in Belize and Uruguay to avoid paying taxes on €4.16 million that Messi earned in image rights from 2007 to 2009. The five-time World Player of the Year has suggested it wasn't his fault, but his father's.
I have signed things, but I never look at the contracts. I don't know what I sign. I trust my dad, who's in charge of my things, and who tells me what I do.
Prosecutors may have been convinced, that is, until Messi's name came up again during the recent Panama Papers scandal. The Barcelona striker and his father opened a company in the tax haven in June 2013, just after the allegations were lodged in Spain. His family has acknowledged the company's existence, but say the Panama account was totally inactive. Messi was absent as the trial opened in Barcelona. He's scheduled to testify in court on Thursday.
Phoebe Lanza-Wood reporting there. Now, an evacuation has been continuing in a Buddhist temple in western Thailand after reports of trafficking. But this isn't your ordinary evacuation, because rather than people, it's tigers being rescued. Yes, you can see them there. Now, the monks in charge of this temple are accused of illegally breeding and trafficking these animals. They've tried to stop efforts to remove the 137 tigers here, but wildlife officials have braved the hot weather and, armed with tranquilizers and a court order, they've evacuated around 20 of the big cats so far. They'll be taken to government and animal refuges. Now, it's been labelled a Disneyland for adults. Bordeaux's Cité du Vin, or City of Wine in English, has opened just in time for Bordeaux's 10th Wine Festival. Phoebe Lanza-Wood tells us all about it.
Raise a glass to France's latest attraction. This is the Cité du Vin, the world's largest wine museum. 25 years in the making, it's finally ready to open. It's in Bordeaux, the home of France's wine country.
It's not that we wanted to just represent something. We wanted to evoke a liquid element, which is, of course, wine, in a building strategically located at the entrance to the city.
The Cité du Vin cost €81 million to build, some 18 million over budget. Designed to resemble wine swirling around a glass, the building offers a panoramic view of Bordeaux. Inside, visitors can sample wines from all around the world, while being taken on an interactive journey of the history of wine.
The product dates back more than 8,000 years and it's a unique product. As soon as vineyards arrive somewhere, the landscape changes, the architecture changes, the economy changes. That's what we're trying to explain to our visitors. When they leave here, we want them to have a different relationship with wine.
The cellar here is home to more than 14,000 bottles of 800 different wines from 80 different countries. The brand new cultural landmark hopes to host 450,000 visitors a year.
Phoebe Lanzerwood reporting there. You're watching France 24. Let's give you an update of our headlines. Anti-austerity strikes threaten to bring neighbours France and Belgium to a standstill. Petrol shortages at the pump, rail networks grounded, and street protests. We'll be bringing you the latest on the government's attempts to turn things around. Ivory Coast begins its first trial for crimes against humanity. In the dock, the wife of former President Laurent Gbagbo, who's charged with her part in the lead-up to a bloody civil war. And a yellow card for one of football's highest-paid players who's been put on trial in Spain for tax fraud. That's it from me for the minute, but don't go away because Molly Hall will be here after the break with all your news from Africa. Do stay with us.
Tech 24.
New technology, the latest.